This is the Senate Judiciary and Public Safety Committee, and today is Wednesday, February 9th. We have 4 bills on the agenda today. The first 2 bills will be presented by our chair, Senator Limmer, which is why I'm leading the meeting today. And members, just a reminder, we plan to lay all 4 bills over for future consideration. We will start with Senator Limmer on Senate File 2847, the Senator Jasinski bill. Senator Limmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senate File 2847 is chief authored by Senator Jasinski. He's not here today, so I will be making the presentation. For the past year, we've seen multiple news stories about police staffing shortages, not just in the cities, but across the state. And this is a very real problem, particularly at a time when violent crime is on the rise. Law-abiding citizens in our communities are expecting police response, and yet at the very same time, they are telling us that we're having trouble recruiting and retaining police officers. The proposal in front of us appropriates $1 million from the general fund to the Commissioner of Public Safety for reimbursement grants to local units of government that operate a Pathway to Policing program. Pathways to Policing is an existing reimbursement program with an annual budget of $400,000. The ongoing annual appropriation, if passed, would be $1.4 million. Pathway to Policing programs are intended to bring persons with non-traditional backgrounds into law enforcement and provides a route for candidates who have at least an associate's degree in any discipline. Upon successful completion of a training program and passing the Peace Officer Standard and Training exam, grantees are eligible for reimbursement. Law enforcement agencies may apply for reimbursement grants to receive up to 50% of the cost of compensating and training Pathway to Policing participants. I think we as a state want law enforcement officers with different and varying backgrounds, experience, and education. I believe this can be a valuable collection of assets to bring to any community, and it may help people move into a second career if they decided to do that. The bill limits the program to local units of government, but I do want to ask the question for later consideration, why wouldn't it apply to non-local law enforcement agencies such as the Metropolitan Airports Commission, State Patrol, BCA, DNR, or the DOC Fugitive Apprehension Unit, just to name some. We do have a person to give testimony here today. Mr. Chairman, Chief, is it Chief? Jay Henthorn, Richfield. He is Chief of Police in Richfield. So, Mr. Chairman, we'll hand it back to you.
All right. Thank you, Senator. Mr. Henforth, Chief Henforth, are you here? There you are.
Yes, I am.
Wonderful.
Yes, I am.
State your name for the record and begin your testimony.
J-A-Y, Henthorn, Henthorne. It's a pleasure to be here today to testify in front of you all. My name is Jay Henthorn. I am the Chief of Police for the City of Richfield. I'm here today speaking on behalf of the Minnesota Chiefs of Police Association, who represents more than 300 police chiefs across the state and over 150 command staff members. This is a crucial initiative for us. Agencies all across the state are struggling with recruiting new officers to our ranks. In conversations that our association has had with chiefs across the state, some departments, even metro departments, are only getting as few as 1 or 2 applicants that are applying. And we are all aware of the shortage of candidates within our state. This funding of the Pathways to Policing program is a great step to help bring new individuals into the profession, and it has worked well. I've spoken with chiefs from St. Louis Park and Bloomington. They've had a lot of success within the program. bringing candidates as far as away as Cleveland, Ohio, into Minnesota to police within their communities. The program allows our profession to recruit and retain candidates from different backgrounds and experiences in the private sector and to lead successful law enforcement careers. We appreciate Senator Jasinski's work on this important issue and stand in full support of this bill. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Chief. Appreciate that. Any questions today for testifier or the author? Any further testimony from the public? Oh, Senator Latz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This has been a successful program in St. Louis Park. They like the way it works. They like the diversity of the recruits it helps to bring in, and I support the program wholeheartedly. I guess one question I do have is how the numbers work here. Number one, how is the $1 million figure determined to be the appropriate dollar amount here? Maybe I'll do this, it'll be better for the mic. How was the $1 million figure determined to be the appropriate level here? And how does it fit? The annual budget is $400,000. Senator Limmer described with an annual ongoing appropriation of $1.4 million. So is the $400,000 the cost of administering the program, and the $1.4 million is the grant money available, or how exactly is that set up?
Mr. Chair.
Senator Limmer.
Mr. Chair, since it's not entirely my bill, I do not have the exact numbers for you. I do know that the whole impetus of this was really designed to encourage people to get involved in law enforcement. And as you may know, we're having trouble finding that. But I would suggest we ask Mr. Turner. He might be able to give us a little more detail on it.
Mr. Turner.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Latz, the $400,000 is in the base. That's what's being sent out as grants to local law enforcement right now. The million would be added to that, so it'd be 1.4 million total in grants. And of course, if there's too many grants, according to the program, they're given out up to 50% proportionately. If there's too few applications, everybody's paid up to 50%, and then the money remains in the account and cancels at the end of the biennium.
Senator Latz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it sounds like there's already $400,000 in the base for this program for this biennium, and then the $1 million would be added to that, so it would become a $1.4 million base amount for ongoing budgeting purposes as well. The tails would then be $1.4 million for the next biennial budget.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Latz, that's correct.
Thank you.
Senator Latz, any further follow-up? Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, we will lay the bill over for possible inclusion. Next, we'll have Senate File 2796. This is a Limmer bill. Senator Limmer, we'll go straight back to you then.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senate File 2796 is in regards to the Metro Transit VSET appropriation. You may remember that we included money for VSET, or Violent Crime Enforcement Team, in our budget this past legislative session. We added $1 million for fiscal years 22 and 23 for additional VSETs across the state. But of this amount, $250,000 was designated each year for a new experimental concept of a VSET unit specifically focused on light rail violent crime reduction. Last fall, during a public safety hearing, we learned that the $250,000 was inadequate amount to meet this challenge. This bill appropriates an additional $750,000 more in fiscal year 23 to the Commissioner of Public Safety for the Metro Transit Violent Crime Enforcement Team, known as a VSET. The base for this program is $1 million in each of fiscal years 24 and 25. This week, I received a letter from Commissioner Harrington as to the progress of this initiative, and the letter is in your committee packets. As you can see, funding shortages which are being addressed in this bill and staffing shortages that would allow for creation of a new VSET to address criminal activities in and around metropolitan transit lines provided some complications to fulfilling this goal. At this time, I'd like to invite Sheriff Fletcher to our testifying table, and he can give a more pronounced perspective of what's happening on our light rail lines.
You should be able to speak into the mic.
Sheriff Fletcher, welcome to the committee.
Mr. Chair, thank you, and thank you for being back here at the Capitol. It's great to be back again. Just to take you back 3 years, if you recall, 3 years ago, we had a series of violent attacks on Metro Transit, particularly on light rail, but also on buses. Bus drivers were being attacked, people were being victimized. And this was pre-pandemic. And you might recall that Representative Congresswoman Betty McCollum had concerns about that, and she went public about the need to do more to protect people on light rail and transit. And there's no doubt that a vibrant metro community relies upon transportation. Now, we are evolving out of the pandemic. We're not out of it yet, and I'll be the first to say that the ridership on both the light rail and the buses is certainly down. But we are going to go back to a vibrant time here once the pandemic is over. And when that vibrancy returns, the victimization and the opportunity for gang members and other violent offenders to victimize people is going to return as well. So there has been some discussion about, well, let's just put this money someplace else. I'm here to support Senator Limmer's suggestion in that we need to maintain this line item and increase it so that we have some incentive for the agencies that are mentioned in the bill to participate. Originally, we had the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office, Minneapolis, St. Paul Police, and Metro Transit. Of course, the Chief of Transit has been nominated to go to the Marshal's office, but I'm confident if there is $1 million appropriation that will be able to bring people to the table. Bringing 5 agencies to the table to work and to put in-kind contributions with only $250,000 on the table makes it very difficult for people to say, how much am I contributing, especially in the light of today's problems. But we had originally asked for $1 million. I know in that year budgets were tight, and so it was chopped down to $250,000. But I want you to remember, we will return to those days of 3 years ago. And when we do, we want to be able to say that we've done something. Now, just conceptually, the Metro Transit officers do a great job of riding Metro Transit and responding to calls, but they don't have the in-depth knowledge of who the perpetrators are out in the community that are riding the trains. They're on the train for their mobility, but they're in the neighborhoods when they're living their lives. And so the concept here is the intelligence from Minneapolis, St. Paul, Ramsey County, Hennepin County can be shared and utilized by Metro Transit by having this joint task force together. And then they actually know who the perpetrators are and who needs the most focused enforcement, if you will. I'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Sheriff. Any questions for the testifier? Seeing none.
Mr. Chair, we also have another testifier, General Manager of Metro Transit, Wes Koistra, I believe. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Very well.
Mr. Koistra. State your name for the record, and you can proceed.
Chair Johnson and members of the committee, my name is Wes Koistra, and I'm the General Manager of Metro Transit. I just want to begin by thanking this committee for the attention it's giving to crime in our communities in near and on transit, as well as for this opportunity to testify on Senate File 2796. As background, Metro Transit serves approximately 90 communities across the region, and we do this with more than 700 buses and rail cars traveling more than 60,000 miles on an average weekday. Across these communities, we have more than 900 bus stops and platforms and 25 transit stations. So crime is, of course, a regional challenge and a community challenge, and these are communities that we at Metro Transit serve and are very much part of. And we recognize that preventing and reducing crime in our communities requires meaningful partnerships among the law enforcement agencies, including the Metro Transit Police Department. The Metro Transit Police Department does work closely with local police departments, and it is not unusual that we are requested to share and coordinate our resources to assist community policing efforts. We must focus our security resources on transit properties and rolling stock, but we are still able to adjust patrols on transit properties to better respond to emerging community crime patterns and other security needs. Due to the significant officer vacancies experienced by us and other police departments across the region, which I appreciate the efforts being made by this committee to address, flexibility in adding security deployments is limited. So many times we must respond by shifting our security focus from one location to another. I'll just say it often feels like we are following and moving crime around rather than getting ahead of it. Systemic solutions are needed, and we agree that more can be done to efficiently leverage the resources we have across the region to address serious crime in our communities in near and on-transit properties. I do want to point out and use this opportunity to point out that our transit customer complaints regarding safety predominantly focus on conduct violations and behaviors that are not violent crimes. Some examples include vandalism, smoking, drinking, littering, loud music, and using transit as a gathering place rather than as a transit service to get to a specific destination. While these examples may not represent serious crimes, they nevertheless lead to negative perceptions of safety by our riders who are sharing a public space on our properties and on our rolling stock. We also hear many complaints that point to riders who have untreated mental illness and chemical addiction. Often these individuals gather on transit because they are without homes or shelter, as housing and shelter programs typically refuse to accept people with serious behavioral issues stemming from these untreated diseases. Our metro region clearly lacks enough permanent housing that offers social services and healthcare treatment that is really required by these individuals to sustain their housing and shelter. In addition to addressing serious crime, we need this legislature to invest more in services that target these unmet social service and healthcare needs. It really is a both and. We believe this could have a significant impact on the quality of life of these individuals, as well as significantly improve the perceptions of safety on and near transit by our riders. We also request your passage of the administrative citations bill that last year received bipartisan support in both the House and Senate. Under current law, riding transit without paying a fare is a misdemeanor crime. This means that our transit police officers are the only personnel who can write a citation for fare noncompliance. Administrative citations bill would allow us to use non-sworn officers to inspect fares and issue citations to people who didn't pay to ride. This approach brings two advantages to help us better address serious crime on our system. First, with administrative citations authority, we would add and assign non-sworn personnel to inspect fares and be trained in customer services. They would be on our trains, buses, and platforms, assisting and interacting with passengers in addition to their fare inspection duties. So these non-sworn employees would become more eyes and ears on the system to deter and report crime and other conduct violations. Second, the administrative citations would relieve police officers of fare inspection duties. So then we can more efficiently target our police resources to address serious crime on our system. Again, we ask your support and passage of this bill. So I will close by repeating that safety on and near transit requires many strategies. We certainly need to find a way to reduce the number of police officer vacancies. We need to seek better ways to coordinate community crime reduction efforts across jurisdictions. We must address the unmet healthcare and social service needs of people with mental illness and chemical addiction. And we need to increase a non-sworn official presence on transit to add eyes and ears on a system and to fulfill administrative functions like fare compliance so our police officers can be directed toward addressing serious issues of crime and violence. So thank you again for this opportunity to testify. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Koistra. Any questions? Senator Limmer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As Mr. Koistra has stated, he raised a number of issues that his profession has seen need of. Wanted to bring us back to the purpose of the bill, and that's the Metro Transit VSAT application. However, I did want to expand our discussion just a little bit because Commissioner Harrington, in his letter, raised it, and I'd like to bring your attention to page 2 of the Commissioner's letter, especially the 3 bullet points at the bottom of page 2, where it states the statutorily named partners discussed several options, and that's regarding the allocation of funds. And there's 3 bullet points that I wanted to raise, and these are bullet points that we're going to have to either decide upon or at least be very much aware of as we consider this bill as we lay it over into the future. I thought I'd bring it up to your attention right now. Commissioner Harrington raises these 3 points. Leaving the funds in place, and the Ramsey County Sheriff would advocate to the legislature to redirect these funds. That's one option. Second one, allocate the funds to already established Ramsey County Violence Crime Enforcement Team and the Hennepin County Violent Offender Task Force for them to target transit violence in coordination with Minneapolis PD and the Metro Transit PD. And the third option, allowing the funds to sit for a year in hopes that the partner agencies will not experience the level of staff shortages they are currently experiencing. And I know Commissioner Harrington did bring up the very real reality of staff shortages. And so those are other considerations as we consider this bill into the future, and those we'll have to find a direction of where we go. And either we can discuss it now or in the future we'll discuss it. And I think we probably need a little more information to really thoroughly vet it and give a direction, but we'll be looking for advice.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Somebody asking a question? Oh, I'm sorry.
No, if you don't mind just commenting on those are all good issues. I would say that keep in mind throwing the money back at an existing VSET is popular amongst a lot of VSETs, but we need to think bigger picture. There are no VSETs that cross the river in terms of getting St. Paul, Minneapolis, Hennepin, and Ramsey County working together. This is an opportunity to gain that cooperation, as it's no secret crime is so mobile nowadays. So I hope you'll consider maintaining this, even though I know I have people in our own organization that would rather have that money just come to our existing VSETs. I don't think it's the long-range right thing to do, and I think a year from now when the violence is increasing back on our transit, we're all going to regret that we didn't try to find a way to focus on our transit issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Let's mute your computer microphone and turn on the microphone.
On your Zoom screen.
Does that work?
Sounds good. Go ahead.
So presently, Sheriff, or to Mr. Koistra, is there a VSET team in place in St. Paul or in the suburb areas?
Mr. Chair,
Sure.
Ramsey County has a VSET team that serves St. Paul, Ramsey County, and suburban Ramsey County. Hennepin County has a VSET, which they call a VOTIV, Violent Crime Offender Task Force. So there are task forces on either side of the river that focus on the geography of each side of the river, and they predominantly work drug cases and then violent cases when violent cases arise that need some assistance.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Sheriff, as already was mentioned, I think that staff shortages are inevitable or are presently in place. Do you have a team then that works with the VSET team as far as, you mentioned in your testimony that you let them know who these individuals that might be riding the train could be, or, and I'm just wondering if you have enough people to be able to communicate with the VSET team and vice versa. And from what I understand, only one person is riding the train from the VSET. It could be more, but it sounds like because of staff shortages, you might only be able to allow one. Is that true?
Sheriff Fletcher?
We have enough people because we've made it a priority. Violent crime has to be a priority right now in Minnesota. And so we have to move individuals to make sure we're addressing it. We do. Now, my goal here, and having done this for 40 years, is to create an environment where our gang unit, our SIU unit, our VSET would have a relationship with this Metro Transit VSET that they, when they needed help, they'd be able to go and help. Right now, there is a feeling that the trains are no one's responsibility but transit, that the buses are no one's responsibility but transit. When a crime occurs on a Metro Transit platform and someone calls 911, St. Paul gets the call, they come there and they wait for Metro Transit to come and take the call. The division between transit responsibility and Metro law enforcement responsibility is stark, but it shouldn't be there. We ought to be working and more collaborative. And this is a historical thing that goes back to how the transit police eventually began and grew. And it's a robust organization, but it doesn't, and they have, and we like those guys, they like us, but we don't work hand in hand on the problems on the buses, and we should try to do that because we do have the bodies to help them. We just need to be welcomed.
So,
Senator Anderson?
So, Mr. Chair, thank you. So, Sheriff, it sounds like it's an in-house problem between the city council and the sheriff or the city police chiefs or the transit of trying to come together to work together?
Mr. Chair,
Sheriff Fletcher?
I don't know if it's an in-house problem. It's certainly a historical, cultural problem, but this is one mechanism to fix that, to actually bring people together. And I'll tell you, it's not the first time we've done that. Actually, the existing VSETs brought people together from a wide variety. St. Paul and Ramsey County used to have the same gap, but the existing VSETs brought them together in the same room to combat common crime. Same way in Minneapolis and Hennepin County. We're working more closely now than ever because the VSETs have created that merged cooperation. So I'm just saying the next step is to address one of the crimes around the horizon, which is Metro Transit crime.
Mr.
Senator
Chair,
Anderson?
we've done this in where we've put resource officers in schools to help with unruly kids, or children, I should say. And so and that seems to be working okay. I don't hear any negative, but the concern is that, do we throw more money at something and we find out it's not working? And so I'm just wanting to make sure that the process that is necessary comes to fruition and that we see some results.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Anderson. Thank you, Sheriff. Thank you. Any further questions? Senator Latz?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm trying to get my arms around this. Sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, that this bill would appropriate $750,000 to an organization or a team that does not presently exist, in addition to $250,000 that was previously appropriated to try to promote the establishment of the team that was unsuccessful in doing so. And it sounds like there are interagency issues, and maybe this is a good incentive to get everyone in the same room to start talking to each other. But I guess my first question is, am I accurate in my conclusion that right now there isn't a body to which this money would go, even if it were appropriated? Is that maybe along Senator Limmer's questions that you raised for further?
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Limmer?
Mr. Chairman, currently, first on the dollar amounts, your summation of the dollar amounts is correct. $750,000 to be added to a quarter or 250,000 that was previously committed. Since that time, law enforcement officials began to analyze the earlier $250,000 amount, and they have said it's inadequate. It's not enough resource in order to make much of a dent in it. They need a little bit quantifiable mass to make it work. Commissioner Harrington has given suggestions on who would manage it, and he has 3 bullet points in his letter. And that's also for us to consider as we lay this bill over, and we can make that decision if we decide to go forward with this particular bill.
Senator Latz.
So, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if this is for Senator Limmer or whomever knows, but is there actually a Metro Transit VSET that's operating today?
Senator Limmer.
Mr. Chair, Senator Latz, I think because transit, I believe it was transit police that were analyzing this, they were questioning the dollar resource, and they said it was too little. It might have been, I can't remember the original bill, who got the money. Sheriff Fletcher, do you recall, or did we miss that point?
Yep, Mr. Chair, Senator Limmer.
Sheriff.
The original proposal was for $1 million for the Metro VSET. That's when we came and met with Chair Mariani and Chair Limmer on this issue. It was originally a $2 million for VSET overall, $1 million of which would be dedicated for the Metro VSET. And so from the start, the
Sorry,
number.
Metro Transit VSET?
Metro Transit
Okay.
VSET. So from the start, the number was, and of course, that's a function of the legislature, of course, that things don't always survive in the way that they're proposed. But we have not, I wouldn't say we haven't created an official group, but we've met on this issue and discussed how to create it. And this is where the issue of not enough funds to justify the effort have been raised. So to your question, Senator Latz, does it exist? It exists on paper in statute. Has it ever actually functioned? No, and the primary reason was because the dollars requested, it was a quarter of the dollars requested. And I think that's why we're back here to decide what happens to those dollars.
Thank you, Sheriff Fletcher. Senator Latz.
So, Mr. Chairman, is the suggestion then that if we sweeten the pot more, provide enough additional resources, then there will be enough there to allow the actual creation on the ground of this VSET for Metro Transit? And then everyone will be able to overcome their jurisdictional and cultural issues and work together, and all agencies will respond, to a 911 call and handle the situation?
Senator Latz, was that Sheriff Fletcher or
Well, I
Chair?
guess kind of both. It sounds like the idea is, one, we got to put more money in so there's enough incentive there to make this body function. And then the second question is, how do you make them work together? Sounds like from Commissioner Harrington's letter anyway, there are more issues here than who's the fiscal agent.
Mr. Chair,
Senator Limmer.
metropolitan area, at least with law enforcement, it's a more compact area. We have lots of overlapping jurisdictions. And as a result, either some people, they all want to get, these groups all want to get in on the act, or they don't want to get in on the act. And so Commissioner Harrington, as he was looking at our new proposal, he began to point out other places where we should focus on, and primarily who's going to manage this. And that will be our charge as we proceed.
So,
Senator Latz.
Mr. Chairman, Sheriff,
Yes, sir.
I can tap into your expertise here. How would you suggest, if you have an idea, that we as a legislative body could, other than, or in addition to adding $750,000 to the funding to make it worth it to put the effort in for this VSET and Metro Transit to happen. How can we cause everyone to get into the same room and to actually work together to make this happen? I mean, I understand the staffing shortages, which is it's a related problem we have to address, I think, more globally as well. But, I mean, do we need to task the Commissioner of Public Safety and give him the authority to require local agency participation in a VSET for Metro Transit or in a coordinated VSET? Do we need to task Superintendent Evans at the BCA with that responsibility? Do we need to give some statutory directive to the Metropolitan Council that they must cooperate and work together with? I mean, how do we go about doing this if in the last year, and it sounds like this goes back a long ways, it hasn't happened and the money wasn't enough to overcome the historical barriers to cooperation? How do we make that cooperation happen?
Sheriff Fletcher, I think the question is how do we get the harmony between agencies? Then I'll follow up with a world peace question after that.
Well, I've been coming to this body since 1982, and Senator, you've been up here a long time as well.
Not that long, Sheriff.
No, any attempts to try to get local governments to do things together always have a number of obstacles in front of them. So I will tell you that I've worked this through for the last 3 years, and if you want an effective organization to help combat crime on transit, this is the best solution. How do we get people? The commissioner's not capable of compelling people. We need to offer enough incentive financially that they don't see themselves as losers financially. And by the way, on the issue of hiring is very important, recruitment is important, but the reason it's important is because we're getting less candidates, which means we get less quality candidates. I'm confident we can find people that want to be police officers, but they may not be the ones that we want on the street in critical situations. And so that's why we need money to recruit and broaden the pool. But Senator Latz, I appreciate the question. I think this is the best way to get people in the same room to combat a common problem.
Senator Latz, follow up.
So, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that. I would note that the chair of this committee does have a bully pulpit, at least, if not a gavel, to even convene a hearing, to pull together the representative parties and say, why aren't you working together, either formally or informally? Maybe that's an added incentive, or the potential for that is an added incentive with the additional funding that would reduce the barriers so they don't feel like they're losing money. And then ask them to report back to the legislature as to how they have engaged in that common purpose and law enforcement cooperation, by a certain deadline. I mean, there are things we can do short of merging agencies, which I'm not suggesting, or putting in, one overseer over the agencies, which I'm not suggesting either. But it seems to me we as the public have a right to insist that all of our local agencies work together when there are common issues that need to be addressed. And it's rather distressing for me to hear a suggestion that it's that they're not. Politics is often about jurisdiction and resources and so on at every level, not just at the state. And I understand it's interpersonal relations and all that stuff kind of gets into the mix no matter what you're talking about. But there are ways to overcome that, and at least we should make the effort to do so. I did have a follow-up question on a related matter that was raised. Well, two related matters. One is the issue of administrative citation for fair non-compliance.
Senator Latz, does that pertain to this particular bill?
Well, it was raised by Mr. Koistra as authority that they like to have, and it seems to me if part of our goal is to reduce the incidence of crime on Metro Transit, that might be a very effective way to do it. And we ought to My recollection is it did not pass last year, that there, although maybe, or in the past, I don't think it's current law. So I think it might be worth taking another look at how we can get more non-sworn officers, staff, eyes and ears, customer service representatives onto Metro, the LRT and onto the buses, so they can help not only deal with fair noncompliance, which if someone's intent on going to commit a crime on LRT, they're probably not paying a fare to get on there in the first place, so that's a good entry point. But also just the eyes and ears to call in sworn officers when it's necessary, from whichever agency's in the best position to respond at the moment, as far as I'm concerned. So I guess I'd ask the chair of this committee to look at putting that bill on our agenda so we can consider how it might be effective in helping address this very real concern, get it in place before or as the population of ridership is rebounding. And then the second, I guess, comment I'll make is this has come up, I think, in almost every hearing where we've talked about public safety and how to solve crime, and that's the mental health concern. And this is not to suggest that every criminal out there has a diagnosed mental health issue, but it's been a common theme in terms of resources and in terms of perpetrators, in terms of our jail populations, in terms of how do you prevent recidivism, is that we have a large unaddressed mental health problem in society, and it's only worse now after 2 years of stress and tension and quarantine and fear over a global viral pandemic. And I think we really need to take a serious run at addressing those issues. And perhaps we have the budget capacity this year to make some game-changing investments. If we're really serious about reducing crime, which I think we all are, I think that has to be a part of the solution, and this committee is in the perfect position to help drive that as a solution as we work through our budget policy process this spring. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Senator Latz. I do see 3 hands still up. So Senator Pappas, we'll start with you and move on to Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to clear up one question, and that in the commissioner's letter, it says that the existing funds, the $250,000, were recommended to be allocated to Ramsey County VSET and Hennepin County VSET, and I believe Hennepin County was the fiscal agent. So I'm just wondering if that actually happened, and if those funds were, how those funds were utilized then, and perhaps Sheriff Fletcher could answer that, as he was supposed to get half the money.
Yeah, Sheriff Fletcher.
Senator Pappas, great question. That decision made by the Oversight Council of the VSETs that meets with the BCA, KenSAS, et cetera, was made with the belief that there was no possibility of increasing the funding for the Metro Transit VSET. And so it's the position of the chiefs and sheriffs that if there's no more funding to be granted, they would want that to be returned to the Hennepin and Ramsey VSETs, which of course several of the people that work for me said, yeah, that's great, can we get half of that money? I'm here to tell you that it's not as simple as that. We need to think bigger picture. But yes, if there is no possibility for funds, if those funds can't be increased to $1 million, we would recommend that it be redispersed to the existing VSETs.
Just to be clear, Mr. Chairman, if I could, so that money's still sitting in the bank. It hasn't been distributed or spent.
Sheriff Fletcher.
Well, that's my understanding. I believe the commissioner still has it in the bank and hasn't distributed, because by statute, he can only allow it to be given out to the Metro Transit VSET.
I got it. Thank you.
Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Response to Senator Latz, trying to work together with people. Since I've been in the legislature, I've been trying to work with the townships and the cities to figure out how to do annexation, and that's been decades. And so to say that these people can come together and work it out, and we get the bully pulpit, and we can make these people do it, good luck. But I also have to say regarding mental health, we brought up mental health back when in 2014, Barb Goodwin had a Senate bill for $8 million to build a mental health facility. Ingebrigtsen and I both signed on to her bill, and it got squashed by the governor. So dealing with mental health has been something that's been a long time thing doing, and we need to do it because it's now crept into our crime to the point of there's no return, it doesn't seem like. And if we don't get a handle on it, we will never get a handle on it. So I appreciate the comments, and we got a long ways to go.
Thank you, Senator Anderson, for your thoughts on that. Seeing no further questions, we will lay this bill over for possible inclusion. I'll pass the gavel over to the official chairman.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. Next on our agenda is Senate File Number 2890. Sheriff Fletcher, I believe you're going to be requested to give advice to us again, so you might as well grab a chair at the table. And this is Senator Ingebrigtsen's bill.
It's good to get up and move around a little bit.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Senate File 2890 is a Ramsey County Sheriff's Office grant establishment for technology to detect gunshot appropriation bill. The bill appropriates $2 million from the general fund to the Commissioner of Public Safety for a grant to the Ramsey County Sheriff's Office to acquire and maintain gunshot detection system that is capable of accurately detecting the precise location and time of gunfire, as well as the number of shots fired.